The stars around Kepler Station burned with the light of war. Explosions lit up the darkness as enemy ships fired their weapons at the small human outpost. The station shook with each hit, its metal walls groaning under the attack. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, watching the battle through the main screen. Her uniform was dirty and torn from 3 days of fighting. Dark circles under her eyes showed how little sleep she had gotten. Around her, the crew worked at their stations, trying to keep the station's weapons and shields working. "Shield strength down to 30%, called out Lieutenant Torres from his position. His voice was tired but steady. "The forward cannon is offline. Engineering says they need at least an hour to fix it." Sarah nodded but said nothing. ND, hour was time they did not have. Outside the station, the enemy fleet filled the space around them. The Zephyrian ships looked like giant insects made of metal and flesh. Their hulls were dark and wet, pulsing with strange lights. More than 200 of these ships surrounded Kepler Station. The Zephyrians were not like humans or any of the other species in the galaxy. They looked like huge bugs that walked on 2 legs. Their skin was hard like shells, and they had 4 arms with sharp claws. Their eyes were black and showed no mercy. They had come to take the station and everything in it. Admiral Vexhai watched the battle from his own ship. He was not human but had been fighting alongside them for many years. His people, the Saurians, looked like walking lizards. They were smart and good at war, but even Vexhai was worried about this fight. "The humans are brave," he said to his second in command. "But bravery will not stop those weapons." His ship was part of the defense fleet around Kepler Station. There were ships from many different species there. The Ethereals had sent their crystal ships that moved like ghosts through space. The Corvin Union had brought their heavy cruisers with thick armor. Even some of the smaller species had sent what ships they could, but it was not enough. The Zephyrian fleet was too big and too strong. On the main communication channel, reporters from across the galaxy were talking about the battle. They came from the Neutral Commerce Guild, a group that stayed out of wars but recorded everything for history. Their voices filled the airwaves. "This is reporter Clixton from the Guild Ship Observer. The human station continues to fight, but experts say they cannot last much longer. The Zephyrians have been attacking for 72 hours without stopping." Another voice joined in. "This is the first time we have seen humans face such a large enemy fleet alone. Will they surrender, or will they fight to the end?" The questions made Admiral Vexhai angry. These reporters acted like they were watching a game instead of real people dying. But he understood why they were interested. Humans were still new to the galaxy. They had only made contact with other species 50 years ago. Many people wanted to see how tough they really were. Queen Admiral Escobar commanded the Zephyrian fleet from her massive ship. It was bigger than any other vessel in the system. Shaped like a giant spider with weapons growing from its body like extra legs, she sat in her command chamber, her 4 arms working different controls at the same time. "Send the surrender message again," she ordered. Her voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. "Tell them they have one more chance to give up." My message went out to Kepler Station on all channels. "Humans of Kepler Station, this is Queen Admiral Escobar of the Zephyrian hegemony. Your position is hopeless. Surrender now and we will allow your people to leave safely. Continue fighting, and we will take the station by force. You have 10 minutes to decide." On the station's bridge, Sarah Chen listened to the message. Her crew looked at her, waiting for orders. She could see the fear in their eyes, but also determination. These people had chosen to serve on the edge of human space, far from home and safety. "Commander," Lieutenant Torres said quietly, "maybe we should think about the offer. The civilians on the station." Sarah held up her hand to stop him. She had been thinking about those same people. There were families on Kepler Station. Scientists, engineers, shopkeepers, and their children. More than 10,000 people who had trusted her to protect them. But she also knew what would happen if they surrendered. The Zephyrians did not keep their promises. They would take the humans as slaves and use the station for their own purposes. It would give them a base to attack deeper into human space. "Open a channel to the Zephyrian flagship," Sarah ordered. The communications officer pressed some buttons. "Channel open, Commander." Sarah looked directly at the main screen, knowing her words would be heard not just by the enemy but by everyone listening across the galaxy. "Queen Admiral Escobar, this is Commander Sarah Chen of Kepler Station. Your offer is rejected. We will not surrender." There was silence for a moment. Then Escobar's harsh voice came through the speakers. "Then you choose to die, human. We will take your station and pick through your bones." "Maybe," Sarah said calmly. "But reinforcements are coming. When they get here, you'll wish you had left while you still could." Admiral Vexhai heard those words and felt confused. He knew where all the human fleets were. The nearest one was 6 days away, even at maximum speed. There were no reinforcements coming. The reporters were excited by Sarah's words. They started talking quickly into their microphones, telling their audiences about the human commander's bold claim. But most of the experts they talked to shook their heads. "It's impossible," said one military analyst. "The humans have no ships close enough to help. Commander Chen is either lying or hoping for a miracle." Queen Admiral Siskovar laughed when she heard about reinforcements. It sounded like metal grinding together. "Let them come. We will destroy them like we will destroy this station." She gave orders to her fleet. The Zephyrian ships moved closer to Kepler Station, their weapons charging with deadly energy. Bioplasma cannons grew from their hulls like tumors, glowing with green fire. These weapons could melt through the strongest armor in seconds. The station's defenders did what they could. They fired their missiles and laser cannons at the enemy ships. Sometimes they scored hits, but the Zephyrian hulls healed themselves quickly. It was like trying to fight a monster that could grow back any part you cut off. As the battle continued, people across the galaxy watched and waited. Some hoped the humans would find a way to win. Others bet on how long they would last. The Zephyrians were confident they would have the station by morning, but Sarah Chen stood on her bridge watching the stars and waiting. She had not lied about reinforcements. Deep in her heart, she believed help was coming. She just hoped it would arrive before her people ran out of time. The battle for Kepler Station was about more than one outpost. It was a test of human will against impossible odds. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, something was moving toward them at speeds no one thought possible. The second day of the siege began with more bad news. The station's main power core was running low. Half of the defense guns were offline, and the shield generators were failing one by one. Commander Sarah Chen walked through the corridors of a Kepler station, seeing the tired faces of her people. In the medical bay, doctors worked on wounded soldiers and civilians. The smell of burnt metal and medical supplies filled the air. Sarah stopped to talk to some of the injured, telling them they were doing great and that help was coming. She hoped her voice sounded more confident than she felt. "Commander, Doctor," Martinez said as she prepared to leave. "We're running out of medical supplies, and some of these people need treatment we can't provide here." Sarah nodded. "Do what you can, Doctor. This will be over soon." She hoped that was true. Back on the bridge, Lieutenant Torres was studying the sensor readings. The Zephyrian fleet had moved even closer during the night. Their ships formed a perfect circle around the station, blocking any chance of escape. "Any word from Earth Command?" Sarah asked. "Nothing new," Torres replied. "Admiral Harrison says the nearest fleet is still 5 days out. He suggests we consider evacuation." Sarah almost laughed. Evacuation to where? The Zephyrian ships would destroy any transport that tried to leave. They were trapped like mice in a cage, waiting for the cat to get hungry enough to pounce. Admiral Vexhai had spent the night moving his ships to better positions. His Saurian engineers had worked hard to repair damage from yesterday's fighting, but he knew it would not be enough. The Zephyrians were just playing with them now like a predator that enjoys watching its prey suffer. "Sir," his sensor officer called out, "I'm getting something strange on long-range scanners." Vexhai walked over to look at the readings. At the very edge of the system, something had appeared. It looked like a ship dropping out of faster-than-light travel, but the signature was wrong. "What type of ship is it?" he asked. The officer shook his head. "I don't know, sir. The energy pattern doesn't match anything in our database. It's not Zephyrian, not ethereal, not Corvin. It might be human, but it's using some kind of drive system I've never seen. Across the system, other ships were picking up the same reading. The reporters from the Neutral Commerce Guild were excited by this new development. They started broadcasting updates to their audiences. This is reporter Clixtan with breaking news. A single unidentified vessel has appeared at the edge of the Kepler system. Military experts are trying to determine its origin and purpose. Queen Admiral Siskvar heard the reports and checked her own sensors. Her ship's computers also could not identify the newcomer. This annoyed her. The Zephyrian database was one of the most complete in the galaxy. Every known ship type was recorded there. Send a squadron to investigate, she ordered. If it's another human ship coming to help, destroy it before it gets close. But her sensor officers were confused by what they were seeing. The unknown ship was moving toward them, but not at normal space speeds. It seemed to be jumping from point to point, appearing and disappearing like a ghost. Queen Admiral, her chief sensor operator, said nervously, "The ship is using some kind of space folding technology. Our computers say it should be impossible." Skavar's forearms clicked impatiently. "Nothing is impossible. Find out what it is and how to destroy it." Meanwhile, the mysterious ship was getting closer. As it moved through space, it began broadcasting on all communication channels. The message was simple but shocking. "This is the UES Prometheus. Stand down immediately or face the consequences." The words reached every ship in the system at the same time. On Kepler Station, Sarah Chen felt her heart jump. She had never heard of any ship called Prometheus in the human fleet. But the voice, speaking, was definitely human, with an accent she could not place. "Torres, check the fleet registry," she ordered. "Find everything you can about the UES Prometheus." Torres worked quickly at his console, searching through all available databases. After several minutes, he looked up with confusion. "Commander, there's no record of any human ship with that name. Not in active service, not in construction, not even in the planning stages." Sarah frowned. Where had this ship come from? And why was it telling the entire Zephyrian fleet to stand down? One ship against more than 200 seemed like suicide. Admiral Vexhai was having the same thoughts. His communications officer had contacted every allied ship in the system, but none of them knew anything about the Prometheus. It was a mystery that made no sense. "Sir," his sensor officer called out again, "I'm getting a better reading on the unknown ship. It appears to be cruiser-sized, maybe 400 meters long. No escort vessels detected." Vexhai stared at the readings. A single cruiser was challenging the entire Zephyrian armada? Either the humans had gone crazy or they knew something nobody else did. The reporters were going wild with speculation. Their voices filled the communication channels as they tried to explain what was happening. "This is unprecedented," one expert said. "A single human vessel is demanding that a fleet of over 200 ships surrender. Either this is a desperate bluff, or the humans have developed some kind of new weapon technology." Queen Admiral Siskvar decided she had heard enough. She gave orders to her squadron commanders. "Intercept and destroy the human ship before it gets closer. Use overwhelming force. I want to send a message to anyone else who might be watching." 12 of her heavy destroyers broke away from the main fleet and moved toward the approaching Prometheus. These were powerful ships, each one capable of destroying several human cruisers in normal combat. Their bioplasma cannons charged with deadly energy, ready to turn the mysterious newcomer into space dust. But as the Zephyrian ships closed the distance, something strange happened. The Prometheus did not try to run or hide. It did not launch fighters or activate any visible defense systems. It just kept moving toward them at steady speed, as if 12 heavy warships were not a threat at all. "This is Squadron Leader Vaktal to unknown human vessel," came a transmission from the lead Zephyrian ship. "You are in violation of hegemony space and interfering with a military operation. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." The response from the Prometheus was calm and clear. "This is Captain Morrison of the UES Prometheus. You have 30 seconds to change course and withdraw from this system. This is your only warning." The Zephyrian pilots made sounds that were like laughing. If insects could laugh. One small human ship was threatening them? It was either very brave or very stupid. Squadron leader Vaktal gave the order to fire. All 12 ships opened up with their bioplasma cannons at the same time. Streams of green energy flew through space toward the Prometheus, enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Everyone watching held their breath, waiting to see the human ship torn apart. The reporters prepared to describe the quick end of the mysterious vessel. Even Sarah Chen closed her eyes, not wanting to see another human ship destroyed. But when the weapons hit, something impossible happened. The plasma bolts struck an invisible barrier around the Prometheus and simply stopped. For a moment, the energy hung in space like green lightning frozen in time. Then suddenly all that power reversed direction and flew back toward the Zephyrian ships. But now it was somehow stronger, brighter, and more deadly than before. The 12 heavy destroyers had no time to react. Their own weapons reflected back at them with increased power, tore through their hulls like paper. In seconds, all 12 ships were reduced to glowing debris scattered across space. Silence fell over the battlefield. Every ship, every station, every reporter stopped talking. What they had just seen was impossible according to every law of war, physics they knew. Energy shields could absorb or deflect weapons, but they could not reflect them back with greater power than they had originally. Queen Admiral Skvar stared at her sensors, not believing what they told her. 12 of her best ships had been destroyed by their own weapons. The human vessel continued approaching, undamaged and seemingly unconcerned by what had just happened. For the first time since the battle began, fear crept into her thoughts. What kind of ship was this Prometheus? And what other impossible things could it do? The destruction of 12 Zephyrian ships in seconds had changed everything. Across the system, military commanders tried to understand what they had just witnessed. The reporters fell silent for the first time since the battle began, their voices caught in their throats. Queen Admiral Seskivar felt something she had never experienced before. Uncertainty. In all her battles across the galaxy, she had never seen weapons that could do what the Prometheus had just done. Her claws clicked nervously against her command chair as she watched the human ship continue its approach. "Analysis report," she demanded from her science officers. "Queen Admiral, our computers cannot explain what happened," came the nervous reply. "The energy reflection appears to violate several fundamental laws of physics. The returned plasma was approximately 3 times stronger than what we fired." Skivar's eyes narrowed. Nothing violated physics. There had to be an explanation. "Send 20 ships this time. Hit it with everything at maximum range. If it can only reflect a certain amount of energy, we'll overwhelm it." But even as she gave the order, doubt crept into her voice. What if they couldn't overwhelm it? What if this mysterious human ship had capabilities beyond anything they had ever faced? The Prometheus continued moving through space, and as it got closer, the observers could see it more clearly. What they saw confused them even more. The ship's hull seemed to shift and change as they watched. Parts of it became transparent while other sections grew thicker. Weapon ports appeared and disappeared like they were being grown rather than built. Admiral Vexhai had his best sensor officers studying the approaching vessel. Their reports made no sense. "Sir, the ship appears to be rebuilding itself as we watch," reported his chief science officer. "The hull composition is changing, constantly. Our scanners detect metals that shouldn't exist, energy patterns that don't match any known technology. Could it be some kind of shape-shifting alien vessel pretending to be human?" Vexhai asked. "No, sir. The communication signals are definitely human, and our database confirms the voice patterns match Earth regional dialects. But the technology, it's like nothing we've ever seen." On Kepler Station, Commander Sarah Chen was having similar thoughts. She had managed to get a better look at the Prometheus through the station's telescopes, and what she saw made her wonder if her reinforcements were really human at all. "Torres, are you sure our databases are complete?" she asked. "Could there be human ships we don't know about?" Lieutenant Torres shook his head. "Commander, I've checked everything. Every human ship ever built is in our records. The Prometheus doesn't exist in any official capacity." Sarah stared at the screen showing the approaching vessel. If it wasn't in the official records, where had it come from? And how did humans develop technology that could reflect enemy weapons with increased power? 20 Zephyrian ships moved to intercept the Prometheus, spreading out in a battle formation. These were not just destroyers, but heavy cruisers and battleships, vessels that could destroy entire fleets in normal combat. Their bioplasma cannons were charged to maximum power, and they also prepared kinetic weapons and gravity bombs. Squadron Commander Thakis led the attack group. She was one of Siskovar's best officers, with hundreds of victories to her name. But as she watched the human ship approach, she felt something unusual. Fear. "All ships, prepare to fire on my command," she ordered. "Hit it with everything at the same time. Don't give it a chance to reflect our weapons." The Prometheus seemed to sense the incoming attack. Suddenly its hull began changing more rapidly. Weapon systems that looked like nothing in any database emerged from its surface. Some looked like traditional energy cannons, but others defied description. There were devices that seemed to bend space around them, weapons that appeared to be made of pure light, and systems that hurt to look at directly. "Fire!" Thakis commanded. 20 warships unleashed their full firepower at the same time. Bioplasma, kinetic rounds, gravity bombs, and energy beams filled the space between them and the Prometheus. It was enough destructive power to crack a moon in half. But the human ship did something that made everyone watching question their sanity. Instead of trying to avoid the incoming fire, it flew straight into it. The various weapons struck its hull, and for a moment it looked like the Prometheus was being torn apart. Then the ship's hull began to glow. The weapons hitting it seemed to be absorbed into the metal itself. The ship grew brighter and brighter until it was painful to look at directly. Energy patterns ran across its surface like veins of light. When the Prometheus fired back, the weapons it used were completely different from anything anyone had ever seen. Beams of energy that seemed to phase in and out of reality struck the Zephyrian ships. These beams passed right through their shields as if they weren't there and struck the hulls directly. But that wasn't the strangest part. Some of the projectiles the Prometheus fired seemed to multiply as they flew through space. One missile became 2, then 4, then 8, until each of the 20 enemy ships was facing dozens of incoming weapons. Other weapons seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Energy waves that looked like ripples in space itself washed over the Zephyrian formation. The ships caught in these waves simply stopped working. Their engines shut down, their weapons went silent, and their life support systems failed. The crews were alive but helpless, floating in dead ships. Within minutes, all 20 Zephyrian vessels were either destroyed or disabled. The Prometheus continued its approach, apparently undamaged and somehow looking stronger than before. Queen Admiral Iskavar watched the destruction of her second attack group with growing horror. 42 of her ships had been lost, and the human vessel seemed to be getting more powerful with each attack. "How is this possible?" she whispered to herself. Her science officers had no answers. The energy readings they were getting from the Prometheus made no sense. It appeared to be using the attacks against it as fuel for its own weapon systems. Every shot that hit it made it stronger. The reporters covering the battle had finally found their voices again, but their words came out in stutters and gasps. This is impossible," reporter Klixtan managed to say. "The human ship is using weapons that shouldn't exist. Our science experts are saying this violates everything we know about physics and engineering." Across the galaxy, people watched their screens in amazement and fear. The humans, who had been seen as brave but technologically inferior, had just demonstrated weapons that seemed to come from another universe entirely. Admiral Vexhai felt his world changing as he watched the battle. Everything he thought he knew about human capabilities was wrong. If they could build ships like the Prometheus, what else were they capable of? "Get me a direct line to Earth Command," he ordered his communications officer. "I need to know where this ship came from." But Earth Command was just as confused as everyone else. Admiral Harrison's voice crackled over the communication system. "Admiral Vexhai, we have no information about any ship called Prometheus. This is as much a surprise to us as it is to you." The implications of those words hit everyone at the same time. If Earth Command didn't know about the Prometheus, then where had it come from? Were there humans somewhere in the galaxy that even Earth didn't know about? Queen Admiral Sukvar made a decision that went against every instinct she had. Instead of sending more ships to attack, she ordered her entire fleet to focus their fire on the single human vessel at the same time. Over 150 remaining warships prepared to unleash the kind of firepower that could destroy a small planet. "If we can't understand it, we'll overwhelm it," she declared. "No shield or weapon system can handle the combined fire of our entire fleet." But, as she gave the order, Sukvar couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to make the worst mistake of her military career. The Prometheus had already proven that normal rules didn't apply to it. What would happen when they gave it the power of an entire fleet to absorb and reflect? The answer would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The command went out across the Zephyrian fleet like wildfire. Every remaining ship turned its weapons toward the approaching Prometheus. Bioplasma cannons grew from hulls like angry flowers, gravity bombs armed themselves, and kinetic weapons loaded their deadliest rounds. More than 150 warships prepared to fire at the same target. Queen Admiral Sukvar watched her fleet move into position. This was the largest concentration of firepower the Zephyrian hegemony had ever assembled in one place. The combined weapons of her armada could crack planets and boil away atmospheres. Surely no single ship, no matter how advanced, could survive. What was coming? "All ships report ready," her communications officer announced. "Fire everything," Sukvar ordered. "Destroy that ship and end this madness." The space around Kepler Station lit up like a new star being born. Hundreds of weapons fired at once, sending streams of deadly energy toward the Prometheus. The amount of firepower crossing that distance was beyond anything most people had ever imagined possible. But as the massive attack reached its target, something happened that made every observer question their understanding of reality itself. The Prometheus didn't just absorb the incoming fire like before. Its hull began to change in ways that hurt to look at. The ship seemed to become larger and smaller at the same time, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The weapons, fire struck the vessel and simply disappeared. Not reflected, not absorbed, but gone as if it had never existed. The energy patterns around the Prometheus grew so complex that sensor equipment across the system began to fail just trying to record them. Then the human ship began to glow with power that came from somewhere beyond normal space. When it finally responded to the attack, what it unleashed was not weapons in any sense that the galactic community understood. Waves of energy that looked like cracks in reality itself spread out from the Prometheus. These waves didn't destroy the Zephyrian ships. Instead, they simply turned off everything that made them work. Engines stopped, weapons powered down, life support systems went silent, and even the biological components of the ships went into some kind of sleep state. In less than 10 minutes, the entire Zephyrian armada was floating helpless in space. Over 150 warships had been reduced to harmless debris, their crews alive but unable to move or fight. The silence that followed was more frightening than any explosion could have been. Across the galaxy, desperate messages were being sent between governments and military commands. Everyone wanted answers about the Prometheus and its impossible capabilities. Deep in the archives of the oldest civilizations, researchers began looking for any reference to technology like what they had just witnessed. It was an ancient ethereal librarian who found the first clue. In records that had been sealed for over a century, she discovered mentions of humans who had disappeared beyond the galactic rim before first contact had been established. "Here," she said to her supervisor, pointing at text written in the old script. References to the Silent Ones, humans who rejected the idea of joining galactic civilization and went into the dark spaces between galaxies. The supervisor leaned closer to read the faded words. "It says they were scientists and engineers who believed humanity's destiny was to transcend the limits of known physics. They took their ships and knowledge into unexplored space and were never heard from again." This information spread quickly through diplomatic channels. Within hours, representatives from dozens of species were studying the ancient records, trying to understand what they meant. On Earth, Admiral Harrison was in an emergency meeting with the Planetary Council. The discovery of the old records had reached them too, and the implications were staggering. "You're telling me," said Counselor Williams, "that there are humans out there who have been developing technology in secret for over 100 years?" Admiral Harrison nodded grimly. "The records from the early colonial period mention several groups who refused to accept the limitations placed on human expansion. They called themselves names like the Outbound Project and the Beyond Initiative. We thought they had all died in the deep space expeditions." "Apparently not," Williams replied. "If the Prometheus is any example of what they've accomplished, they've surpassed anything we thought possible." Back at Kepler Station, Commander Sarah Chen was trying to establish contact with the mysterious ship that had saved them. The Prometheus had positioned itself near the station, its strange hull still shifting and changing as she watched. "UES, Prometheus, this is Commander Chen of Kepler Station. Please respond." For several minutes there was no answer. Then a voice came through the speakers, clear and unmistakably human, but with an accent that was hard to place. "Commander Chen, this is Captain Morrison of the Prometheus. It's good to meet you even under these circumstances." Sarah felt relief flood through her. Whatever the Prometheus was, whoever these people were, they were human. "Captain Morrison, I need to ask, where did you come from? Your ship isn't in any of our records." There was a pause before Morrison answered. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight of sadness and longing. "Commander, we come from the places your maps mark as empty space. We are the descendants of humans who chose a different path, long before your people knew they were not alone in the galaxy." "The Silent Ones," Sarah whispered, remembering the reports that had been coming in from across the galaxy. "Yes," Morrison confirmed. "While your ancestors learned to follow galactic law and work within established scientific principles, ours chose to push beyond all known limits. We've spent over a century out there in the dark, learning things that the galaxy doesn't think are possible." Admiral Vex High had been listening to the conversation from his ship. He joined the communication channel with Sarah's permission. "Captain Morrison, I am Admiral Vex High of the Saurian Defense Force. The technology your ship displayed today, it appears to violate several fundamental laws of physics. How is this possible?" Morrison's laugh carried a note of something that might have been pity. "Admiral, your fundamental laws are just the limits of what the galaxy has discovered so far. When you're not bound by the rules that others insist are unbreakable, you find that reality is much more flexible than anyone imagines." The implications of those words hit everyone listening like a physical blow. If the humans beyond the rim had developed technology that could manipulate reality itself, what did that mean for the balance of power in the galaxy? Reporter Clixton was broadcasting live to billions of viewers across known space. Her voice shook as she tried to explain what was happening. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all species, we are witnessing a moment that will change galactic history forever. The human species, who we thought we understood, have revealed capabilities that exceed our wildest theories about advanced technology. Honorary days." Her flagship, Queen Admiral Sikvar, listened to the reports coming from across the galaxy. Her entire fleet was helpless, floating in space like toys that had run out of power. But more frightening than her military defeat was the realization of what it meant. The humans had been holding back. All this time, while the galaxy thought of them as newcomers who were catching up to established civilizations, they had secretly surpassed everyone. The Prometheus wasn't just advanced technology. It represented a completely different approach to science and engineering. "Queen Admiral," her second-in-command said quietly, "what are your orders?" Escobar looked at the readings from her dead fleet, then at the impossible human ship that had defeated them without taking any damage. For the first time in her career, she had no idea what to do. The galaxy was about to learn that the species they thought they knew had been hiding secrets that would reshape everything they believed about power, technology, and the limits of what was possible. The aftermath of the battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of the usual debris fields and emergency rescues, space around Kepler Station was filled with perfectly intact but completely powerless ships. The entire Zephyrian armada floated like sleeping giants, their crews alive but unable to move or communicate. Captain Morrison's voice came across all communication channels, calm and clear as if he had just finished a routine training exercise instead of defeating over 200 warships single-handedly. This is the UES Prometheus to all vessels in this system. The siege of Kepler Station is over. Any further aggression against human interests will be met with appropriate escalation. Those words sent shivers through military commanders across the galaxy. If this was what humans considered appropriate response to a siege, what would they do if truly threatened? Queen Admiral Escobar found herself in a situation no Zephyrian commander had ever faced before. Her entire fleet was helpless, but she and her crews were unharmed. The humans could have killed them all, but they had chosen a different path. It was a kind of mercy that the Zephyrian military code had no words for. Her communication systems were still working, though everything else was dead. She opened a channel to the Prometheus, her voice smaller than it had ever been. "Human vessel, this is Queen Admiral Escobar. I formally surrender my fleet to your authority." Morrison's response was swift but not unkind. "Queen Admiral, your surrender is accepted. Your ships will be restored to minimal power in 1 hour. You will then have 24 hours to leave this system and never return. Any Zephyrian vessel that approaches human space in the future will face the same fate as your fleet today." "Understood," Scavar replied. She had commanded fleets that conquered entire worlds, but she had never been so thoroughly defeated by a single ship. "May I ask, how many ships like yours exist?" There was a long pause before Morrison answered, and when he did, his words chilled every listener to the bone. "That, Queen Admiral, is information your people are not ready to know." Across the galaxy, emergency sessions were being called by every major government. The revelation that humans had secret colonies beyond known space, equipped with reality-defying technology, had turned the political landscape upside down overnight. The Ethereal High Council, which had existed for thousands of years and considered itself the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, held an unprecedented emergency meeting. Their crystal ships, once thought to be the pinnacle of engineering, now seemed primitive compared to what the Prometheus had displayed. "The humans have been among us for 50 years, said Council Leader Zephi, her voice like singing glass. In all that time, they appeared to be learning from us, following our lead in technology and diplomacy. We never suspected they had capabilities that exceeded our own." Council Member Veltar nodded gravely. "The question now is what this means for our position in the galactic community. If the humans have been holding back this much power, what are their true intentions?" Similar conversations were happening in the capitals of every major species. The Corvin Union called back all their fleets from human borders. The Nexus Syndicate immediately began revising their trade agreements to favor human interests. Even the mighty Titan Collective, whose ships were the size of small moons, started treating human diplomatic messages with new respect. On Earth, the revelation about the Silent Ones had sent shockwaves through the government and military. Admiral Harrison found himself in the uncomfortable position of having to explain to the Planetary Council why Earth Command knew nothing about their own species' greatest achievement. "Sir," reported his intelligence chief, "we've been going through the old colonial records. There were at least 6 major expeditions that left Earth in the early 2100s before we made contact with the Ethereals. All of them were officially listed as lost." Admiral Harrison studied the files. The Outbound Project, the Beyond Initiative, the Deep Reach Expedition, these were some of our brightest scientists and engineers. If they survived and have been developing technology for over a century, then we're looking at human capabilities that even we don't understand, the intelligence chief finished. Back at Kepler Station, Commander Sarah Chen was preparing for a conversation that would change her life forever. The Prometheus had requested a private communication channel just between her and Captain Morrison. "Commander," Morrison's voice was warm but carried the weight of years. "I wanted to speak with you personally before we depart." "Captain, I need to know," Sarah said. "Are there more ships like yours? More humans out there beyond our borders?" Morrison was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his words painted a picture that Sarah could barely comprehend. "Commander, what you call human space is just the beginning. Beyond the rim, in the spaces between galaxies, There are colonies that would seem like magic to your people. We've learned to reshape matter at the atomic level, to bend space and time to our will, to build ships that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Sarah felt her worldview shifting. Why didn't you ever contact Earth? Why stay hidden? Because we knew this day would come, Morrison replied. We knew that eventually, humanity would face a threat that required more than conventional weapons to defeat. We've been watching, waiting, preparing for the moment when our people needed protection. And now? Now the galaxy knows that humanity is not what they thought we were. Trade agreements will be renegotiated, military alliances will shift, and diplomatic relationships will be rebuilt from the ground up. Your people will benefit from this knowledge, but they must be careful not to let it go to their heads. As if to emphasize his point, Morrison's next words carried a warning that sent chills down Sarah's spine. Commander, the Prometheus is not alone. There are signals beginning to appear on long-range sensors across human space. Other ships are moving toward inhabited systems, not to threaten anyone, but to make a statement. The galaxy needed to understand that humanity has friends in very high places. Sarah looked at her sensor readings and saw what he meant. Across human territory, mysterious signatures were appearing on the edges of solar systems. Ships that used the same impossible technology as the Prometheus were positioning themselves near human colonies and trade routes. The message was clear to anyone with the intelligence to understand it. Humanity was under protection from forces that could rewrite the laws of physics themselves. In the days that followed, the galaxy watched as trade routes shifted, military budgets were recalculated, and diplomatic protocols were rewritten. Species that had looked down on humans as junior partners now competed to offer the most favorable agreements. The balance of power had shifted overnight. Reporter Clickston filed her final report on the Battle of Kepler Station with words that would be remembered for generations. What we witnessed here was not just a military victory, but the revelation of a truth that changes everything we thought we knew about the galaxy. The humans, who we believed were newcomers trying to find their place among established civilizations, have shown us that they were never catching up to us at all. They had already surpassed us and were simply waiting for the right moment to reveal their true capabilities. As the Prometheus prepared to depart, Captain Morrison sent one final message to Commander Chen. This one was private, meant only for her. Sarah, tell your people that the outer colonies remember their origins. Earth's children are never truly alone. We chose a different path long ago, but we never forgot where we came from. When humanity needs us, we will answer. The ship that had changed galactic history began to fade from normal space, using the same impossible technology that had brought it to Kepler Station. As it disappeared, sensors across the system detected something that would haunt military analysts for years to come. For just a moment, the readings suggested that there weren't just other ships like the Prometheus out there in the dark between stars. There were fleets of them, entire armadas of vessels that used technology beyond current understanding, all watching and waiting in the spaces that most people considered empty. The galaxy had learned that the species they thought they understood had been hiding secrets that dwarfed every other civilization's greatest achievements. The question that would drive politics and military planning for decades to come was simple but terrifying. If the humans could do this much while trying to fit in with galactic society, what could they accomplish if they ever decided to stop holding back? The age of humanity being the newcomers to galactic civilization was over. The age of everyone else trying to understand their place in a human-influenced galaxy had begun.